Welcome back to Narrations. Here, you can listen to timeless movies, meaningful stories, and films that explore the moments when creativity, struggle, and hope collide. Tonight's movie is The Man Who Invented Christmas, a warm, imaginative story about failure, inspiration, redemption, and the birth of one of the most beloved Christmas tales ever written. This is the story of Charles Dickens, not at the height of success, but at his lowest point, and how a desperate winter gave the world a story that would redefine Christmas forever. London, 1843. The city is alive with noise, smoke, and motion. Horse-drawn carriages rattle over cobblestone streets. Factories churn endlessly. The gap between wealth and poverty is stark and unavoidable. Children work long hours. Families struggle to survive. Charity exists, but it is inconsistent and often begrudging. Charles Dickens walks these streets keenly aware of everything around him. Once, he was celebrated. His earlier novels brought recognition, praise, and financial comfort. He became known as a writer who understood the struggles of ordinary people. But success is fickle, and Dickens has fallen out of favor. His recent books have failed to meet expectations. Sales are poor. Critics are dismissive. Worse still, Dickens feels trapped. He is a husband and father with a growing family. His household depends on him. Bills pile up. Publishers grow impatient. The pressure to produce another successful book mounts relentlessly. His wife Catherine offers quiet support, managing the home while caring for their children. But Dickens carries the weight of expectation alone, convinced that failure now would mean disgrace, not just for himself, but for everyone who relies on him. His publishers summon him for a meeting. They speak bluntly. Another failure will ruin him. They urge Dickens to write something practical, something safe, something that aligns with popular tastes. Dickens listens, but frustration simmers beneath his composed exterior. He doesn't want to repeat himself. He wants to say something meaningful. He wants to be heard again. When Dickens proposes writing a Christmas story, the idea is dismissed outright. Christmas books don't sell. Seasonal sentiment is risky. The publishers refuse to fund the project. Dickens leaves the meeting humiliated, angry, and desperate. But something inside him refuses to accept defeat. Against advice, against financial logic, and against the wishes of his publishers, Dickens decides to write the book anyway, and publish it himself. The risk is enormous. If the book fails, he will be ruined. He begins writing A Christmas Carol in a frenzy of urgency and obsession. Ideas pour out rapidly, but doubt follows close behind. His mind is crowded, not just with characters, but with ghosts of his own past. As Dickens writes, his imagination begins to blur with reality. Characters step off the page and into his life, not as hallucinations, but as embodiments of his thoughts, fears, and unresolved emotions. Among them is Ebenezer Scrooge, sharp-tongued, dismissive, and deeply resistant to compassion. Scrooge follows Dickens everywhere. He mocks generosity. He questions kindness. He challenges Dickens' belief that people can change. In many ways, Scrooge represents the hardened world Dickens is writing against, and the parts of himself he fears may be winning. Dickens walks the streets at night, observing the poor, listening to their stories, absorbing their suffering. Memories resurface, of his own childhood spent in poverty, of factory work, of humiliation, of abandonment. These memories fuel the story. Dickens writes with urgency, but his family worries. He isolates himself, becoming short-tempered and consumed. Catherine urges him to rest, to be present, but Dickens cannot stop. Time is running out. Christmas is approaching. Meanwhile, real-world consequences loom. Printers demand payment. Illustrators need approval. Deadlines close in. Dickens insists on expensive production choices, quality paper, rich illustrations, a beautiful binding, knowing that the book must feel special, even if it costs him dearly. His publisher shakes his head, convinced Dickens is making a terrible mistake. As Dickens struggles, the characters of A Christmas Carol continue to haunt him. Jacob Marley appears as a warning, a man defined by regret. The ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come emerge not as fantasy, but as reflections of Dickens' own fears: fear of becoming irrelevant, of failing his family, of leaving behind nothing meaningful. The lines between creator and creation blur. Dickens debates with Scrooge constantly, about mercy, generosity, and whether people truly deserve redemption. Scrooge challenges every hopeful sentiment, forcing Dickens to defend his beliefs. And in doing so, Dickens begins to rediscover them himself. The world around him offers constant reminders of why the story matters. He visits schools, factories, and workhouses. He sees children laboring instead of learning. He hears excuses from the wealthy, explanations that sound disturbingly like Scrooge's arguments. These moments sharpen Dickens' resolve. Christmas, he believes, should not be about excess for the few, but kindness for the many. Not about tradition alone, but compassion. As the deadline approaches, Dickens' health deteriorates. He barely sleeps. His family grows increasingly concerned. Catherine fears that even if the book succeeds, the cost may be too high. Dickens knows he is gambling everything. But he also knows something else. This story matters. It matters because it says something the world needs to hear: that generosity is not weakness, that empathy is not foolish, and that change is possible, even late in life. As the final pages come together, the pressure becomes unbearable. Dickens races against time, doubt, and exhaustion to finish the book before Christmas. Outside, winter tightens its grip on London. Inside, Dickens confronts the final question his story must answer. Can people truly change? And if they can, is it ever too late? As the final days before Christmas close in, Charles Dickens writes as if pursued by time itself. His hands ache. His eyes burn from sleepless nights. Pages pile up around him, marked with corrections, rewritten passages, and sudden inspirations scribbled in the margins. Every sentence feels urgent, as though the story itself is demanding to exist. Scrooge remains close. He lingers in Dickens' thoughts, sharp and relentless, questioning every hopeful turn the story takes. Whenever Dickens softens Scrooge, doubts creep in. Is redemption believable? Will readers accept such a change? Or will they see it as sentimentality, naive and unrealistic? Dickens argues with him endlessly, sometimes aloud, sometimes silently, defending compassion against cynicism, generosity against fear. In doing so, Dickens realizes that this battle is not just literary. It is personal. Scrooge embodies the world Dickens has grown tired of, a society that justifies cruelty as efficiency, indifference as realism. But Scrooge also reflects something darker, the part of Dickens himself that worries about money, reputation, and survival more than empathy. The story becomes a reckoning. When Dickens writes Jacob Marley's Chains, he thinks of lives weighed down by regret. When he writes The Ghost of Christmas Past, memories of his own childhood poverty flood back: the humiliation of factory work, the feeling of being forgotten, the long shadow those years cast over his adulthood. The Ghost of Christmas Present forces him to confront the suffering happening now: children hungry in a city overflowing with wealth, families struggling while others debate whether they deserve help. And the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come terrifies him most, a vision of irrelevance, of dying without having said what mattered. As Dickens writes Scrooge's transformation, something shifts inside him. He realizes the story isn't asking whether people can change. It's asking whether he still believes they should. The manuscript is finally complete. There is no celebration. No relief. Only a quiet, heavy awareness of what comes next. Now the book must face the world. Dickens insists on publishing it himself, despite the financial risk. He argues for every detail: the illustrations, the cover, the quality of the pages, knowing the book must feel like a gift, not just another product. Printers work through the night. Costs spiral. Dickens spends nearly everything he has, wagering his future on a story no one wanted to fund. His publishers remain skeptical. Friends worry. Catherine watches with concern, unsure whether pride or conviction is driving him now. On December 19, 1843, A Christmas Carol is released. At first, there is silence. Dickens waits anxiously, reading newspapers, listening for whispers, bracing for disappointment. He fears that the world will reject the message, that kindness will be dismissed as impractical fantasy. Then something unexpected happens. The book begins to sell. Not slowly. Not cautiously. Rapidly. Readers respond immediately. Families read it aloud by candlelight. Conversations change. People talk about generosity, forgiveness, and responsibility in ways they hadn't before. The story moves beyond entertainment, it becomes a mirror. Even critics who doubted Dickens' judgment are forced to acknowledge the response. The book resonates across class lines, touching people who see themselves both in Scrooge and in those he once ignored. Dickens attends a public reading. As he watches the audience react, laughing, tearing up, falling silent at the story's hardest moments, he realizes the truth. The story didn't just change Scrooge. It changed him. Scrooge fades from Dickens' side, no longer needed as a challenge or opponent. The argument is over. Dickens has chosen his answer. People can change. And stories can help them do it. Yet success does not bring the financial reward Dickens expected. High production costs mean profits are modest. The victory is emotional and cultural rather than monetary. Still, Dickens does not regret the choice. He has said what he needed to say. The film closes by reflecting on the legacy of that winter. A Christmas Carol reshapes how the world sees Christmas, not as a season of excess, but of generosity. It influences charitable movements, public attitudes, and countless adaptations that will echo across generations. Dickens walks through London once more, no longer burdened by failure or fear. He watches people with renewed curiosity and compassion, aware that words can ripple outward in ways their creator can never fully control. He returns home, present with his family again, grounded in the life he nearly lost to obsession. Catherine sees the change. So do the children. The story has ended, but its work has just begun. The Man Who Invented Christmas is not just about writing a book. It's about choosing empathy over fear. About resisting cynicism in a world that rewards it. About remembering that stories matter because people matter. It reminds us that even in moments of desperation, creativity can become an act of hope, and that one voice, used honestly, can reshape how the world sees itself. If you enjoy listening to movies about writers, creativity, redemption, and the stories that shape our traditions, you'll find many more like this here. Like the video if you enjoyed this story, share it with someone who loves Christmas classics and literary films, and subscribe for more movie narrations throughout the season. Thanks for listening, and Merry Christmas.